I'm with Nicola Cornu, who's been doing research on Jersey elections. What have you been discovering, Nick?
Well, I've been looking at candidates' election expenses returns in the judicial graph. And what we've discovered here is probably going to be Jersey's biggest political scandal for decades. Because what we've revealed is that, and it's what we knew anyway, is that the political class is incompetent, that they're arrogant and they're complacent and they're slapdash. Interested? Right.
Well, it sounds interesting so far, but have you got any evidence?
Well, every candidate in an election, in that election for in 2000, the general election 2018, was obliged to return an election expenses form on the appropriate form, which we've got here, and I'm holding it here, and that had to be returned by within 15 working days of the election, with slight bank holiday, 1 day, and that makes it the 7th of June 2018. Now, I've looked at the returns and we have some significant errors.
You've looked at all the returns?
I have looked at all the returns and I think that what I have is accurate. Failure to return this form by the 7th of June 2018 opens one to a criminal offence which carries a fine, and if one is an elected member of the States of Jersey, to automatic disqualification, triggering a by-election. The fine, probably a minimum of £1,000, could be even up to £10,000. The statistics are quite interesting. Of the elected members, 23 are compliant and 26 are non-compliant. That's of the 49 elected states members. Also, there were some candidates. In fact, there were 92 candidates in that general election. Of those candidates, the 43 unsuccessful. 28 were compliant, 15 were non-compliant. Actually, if you just look at that, it seems that the unsuccessful are more compliant than those who get elected. I'm going to take you through the categories of states member. Now let's start with Jersey's political leadership as it's perceived. Those with the all-island mandate. And that's the senators. There are 8 elected. Only 2 are compliant. 6 are non-compliant. And of those 2, 1, a party candidate, is probably non-compliant. So we'll deal with Reform Jersey and their forms. The law seems to state that every candidate must personally return one of these forms. Reform Jersey have returned a form collectively on behalf of all their candidates with their election expenses divided. The Reform Jersey form, single one, which has been put in, is deficient. It's not compliant because it doesn't mention one of their candidates, candidate for constable, who subsequently withdrew. That, in fact, may mean that one senator is in a situation of non-compliance. It might expose all the candidates of Reform Jersey to potential fines and criminal offence. Let's move through to connotabs. Very interesting. They're a special breed, the connotabs. Now, there was one contested election for the 12 constable seats in the States. And the elected person, who was a constable of St Mary, did a return, and he's compliant. As did his opponent, who was unsuccessful. She did a return and is compliant. However, the remaining 11 constables, who were all elected unopposed, who were candidates for 10 minutes in an election, failed to return the forms at all. Now, just to go back about not returning a form, one particular senatorial candidate didn't return the form at all. He returned a spreadsheet, but the law requires the form signed, a specified form provided by the judicial graph. So we have 11 non-compliant constables and only one who's compliant.
The election which didn't take place, which would have taken place, there would have been two candidates in there. One was a Reform Jersey candidate, and the other one was presumably the constable who was returned. Now, both of those ought to have made returns, presumably, because they were briefly candidates, were they?
Correct. Both should have made returns. Neither have.
Right. Okay.
Okay. So, in fact, there were two contested constables' elections. One concluded by virtue of the Reform Jersey candidate withdrawing. The other election, which is in St Mary, led to a poll, and there was a result, and one person was elected as constable. It was a contested election. So, okay, you're correct. Slightly corrected me there.
Okay.
Let's go through and look at deputies. Okay, there were 20 compliant deputies and 9 non-compliant deputies. 2 of those deputies, where there were uncontested elections, failed to return the form at all, and are therefore in breach of the law.
The form is quite specific. It says 5 o'clock on the 7th of June. If you have a proper form, it says it has to be returned.
You raise an interesting issue about what is a proper form. Some of those who've returned their form have done so on the form for the general election in 2014. Okay, it's only minor. And one thing it says at the bottom of the form, now there were 2 versions of the form for candidates in 2018. The first version said that the form, and it says down the bottom here, should be returned by 5 p.m. on the 21st of May. The election was on the 16th. That is a completely erroneous date. The correct date, and as it ultimately was a second correct form, which is currently on the website if anyone cares to check, it says a candidate must complete and deliver this form to the judicial graph by 5 p.m. on the 7th of June 2018. That was the cut-off date. Now let's look how some people complied or failed to comply. One senator in completed the form and had a form which was dated the 21st of May, so he realised that there was an error there. So he, with his fountain pen, put a line through it and put the date, obviously, when he completed the form, which he put the 8th of June. Now, the 8th of June is one day too late, and he duly put it in on the 8th of June. Too late. Quite amusing.
Strictly, that's one day. People might say, "Oh, that's only one day. What does it matter?" the law is quite specific.
Yeah, the law says that it's a strict offence almost, provided and created by the law. In fact, it doesn't require any intention or mens rea. The act itself is the offence. So the fact that one doesn't put in a form within the 15 days by that 5 o'clock on the 7th of June is an offence if you put it in later.
Should we just, whilst we're at this point, what's the importance of making a return anyway? Why would it matter?
Well, simple. Money buys elections. We've known that from the 18th century, Blackadder stuff, with corrupt boroughs. Money buys elections, and so it does today. Look at the presidential election in the United States. Billions are spent to get the candidate elected. In Jersey, there's a recognition generally across democracies that there should be a level playing field. And Jersey has imposed such principles. For a senator, there is a limit to how much can be spent. There's a formula. It's around about £10,000. And for a deputy, it's around £2,250. And presumably likewise for constables, slightly larger, depends on the number of constituents.
Of course, one of the particular problems is where the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association inspectors are here, is the fact that the system is made complex by the three layers, deputies, senators and constables, which makes it complicated. From an expenses point of view, if you're looking at expenses, it becomes very difficult to unravel it, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, just to go back to that point about having a level playing field and why it's important in democracy, because that, if money buys elections, then the rich and powerful in society will determine the outcome. Money and power go together. Those who have money want to have power. But in democracies, there are social groups who don't have money, but because of the nature of struggle, have achieved a democracy which allows them, the non-owners of property, to participate.
And electorally speaking, the most expensive seats are the senatorial seats.
Practically.
And on this test, they're showing themselves to be rather incompetent.
Well, of the 8 successful, probably 2 are compliant. Probably only 1 is compliant. So the Jersey electorate, and I know that's only 30%, and you have to ask yourself a question, those 70 to 80% who didn't vote, because you didn't vote, these are the kind of people who get elected. Incompetent people.
And of course there has been difficulty, actually the nomination forms themselves have caused problems, and the Commonwealth Parliamentary people did look at these aspects, the fact that there was confusion.
The Commonwealth Parliamentary Association report is incredibly critical, and it's already gathering dust in the Jersey way. There's no indication that its recommendations are being implemented.
No. Well, they did call for a proper electoral department to run elections.
They call for lots of things, and nothing has happened. There has been no political will, and that is the essential problem in Jersey. There is no political will to embrace reform, modernisation, democratisation, because the political class does not want that to change. There is a system, opaque, which allows them to remain in power unchallenged. One
of the extraordinary things that you've been doing this research the last few days. Now those papers are there, they're public documents, people can go and see the same documents that you've been looking at. It's rather odd that nobody's done that, isn't it?
No one has, including myself. But I also looked at not just the 2018, but 2014 general election. And in that, likewise, the slightly better compliance is higher compliance by those who are elected, probably because the law had been passed in that very year, 2014, so they're a bit more conscious of it. But still, there were deficiencies, and particularly Reform Jersey's form is a mess, and they got it in late. 2018, they got it in on time.
Now you've done this, we've done this little interview, it'll go out on the world will see it. What do you expect to happen now?
What I would like to happen is probably not what's going to happen. What I'd like to happen is that this would be the trigger for the engagement of large numbers of fellow islanders to realise that their abstention in the political process has a devastating effect. Because good people don't vote, we get bad governments and poor candidates. People who really shouldn't pass muster get through. The system is broken. Even the form that one returns is not accurate. And I think for people who work in the finance industry in compliance or are lawyers, they would be horrified. You'd get sacked if that was your ultimate final product, with the date completely wrong of the piece of legislation to which you're supposed to be complying.
Should we stop there because the time's ticking on my little recorder here? Do you think, is there anything more you want to say that's particularly?
I raised the issue of I didn't think it was going to lead to change, because the Jersey way, and we know what the Jersey way, it appears like the Holy Ghost from time to time, and it has the tendency to sweep things under the carpet for business as usual. And what we get is, there's a Turkish proverb: the dogs may bark, but the caravan rolls on. And these same mistakes will be repeated. We have a by-election occurring in District 3 and 4 very soon. Do you think that there won't be those sort of errors? I hope not. We have a general election. What will the political class have learnt between this scandal and the next general election?
Thank you, Nick.